Well, hello everyone and welcome. Thanks for coming back to Daily Connections. This is Sinika Wah with your Clear Next Step. And we are having these daily calls every day from 1:15 to 1:45 Central Time, just for a chance for us to get some tips, get some ideas, get some techniques, think about practical, tactical things that we can do, but also have a chance to interact with each other. And so for those of you who are on video, we love being able to see you and exchange dialogue and have conversations. Your phones are on mute at the moment for these opening remarks, but then we'll allow you to join in the conversation here shortly as well. So this was, the topic of today was actually requested by one of our participants, really wanting to talk about succession planning and kind of thinking through contingencies and what's next. And so I would love to have this topic be about contingency planning. But I want to define some terms first. So I'm going to give us a couple of terms to define. The first term that we need to define really quickly is disaster recovery. So disaster recovery planning, many of us are living and breathing that right now, right? We are the evidence that we had an organization that had a disaster recovery plan, and we have we're implementing that and enacting that right now. It's really from an organizational standpoint, disaster recovery planning is planning for how you'll handle and recover from an emergency or a disaster. It generally focuses on the vital, the essential, kind of the most important pieces of the business. Make sure that those are accounted for, and then the other things are kind of those things that are less mission critical. They get less attention in a disaster recovery plan. It's about getting your mission critical stuff up and running again. The second thing I want to talk about is contingency planning. So there's our second term, is contingency planning. So contingency planning is a risk mitigation strategy. As a project manager, I use contingency planning all of the time, but it really lets us figure out what an alternative. So let's say a plan B. What does plan B look like if plan A, our current plan, stops working or fails or doesn't produce the results that we were looking for? Usually contingency planning are tied with a specific outcome. So disaster recovery, the outcome is that our business doesn't shut down. Contingency planning is where we have a backup. We produce a certain number of widgets or a certain number of results or achieve a certain number of dollars. Kind of that's what contingency planning is about. And then the last topic is succession planning. So I want to toss that out there as well. The third, succession planning. And this is a leadership approach that we should all be doing and living and breathing every single day. It's where we develop new leaders who can replace existing leaders when those existing leaders move on or retire or move to whatever's next or are no longer with the organization. So a mentor of mine said to me years and years ago that, Sinika, you should always be training your replacement. And if we are always training our replacement, then we are actively engaged in succession planning. So those are kind of the three terms, disaster recovery, contingency, and succession planning. And the one I want to focus on right now is around contingency planning. So disaster recovery, most of us have kind of seen that in action. There are plans in place, and we're kind of living that. And I think as leaders, we should always be doing succession planning. I think it's a thing that we should always be thinking about. If you are interested in more tips on succession planning, by all means, check out our Lead the Way virtual coaching program, because our last session in that really does talk about growing the bench and growing the bench strength in that. So if succession planning is something you're interested in there. But let's talk about contingency planning right here, right now, in the midst of where we are with COVID-19. So things that we want to start, a contingency plan usually has in it somewhere a phrase like if, right? Because it's a contingency for something that is uncertain and unknown and future. So if we keep the social distancing and the working remotely, or the physical distancing and the working remotely, if we keep that plan for 2 more weeks, for 4 more weeks, for 8 more weeks, etc., we should be thinking, what's our contingency? How do we continue to do this? What's our, maybe plan A is that we continue it for a certain amount of time. You've seen some of the governors put statements out as far as, we're expecting to close these things until such and such a date. You've seen schools say we're closed until such and such a date. And then the contingency plan is, okay, well, what if it goes longer? So here's our plan for that long. What if it goes longer, or what if it goes shorter? Another contingency plan we ought to be thinking about is if someone on your team is temporarily pulled away. because they or a loved one are sick or injured, right? These are things that happen. They were true before COVID-19. They'll continue to be true. People get sick, people get injured, people care for aging loved ones, right? These are things that will still happen. But right now, especially when we're all dispersed and we're spread out, we need to be thinking about, well, what happens? What happens if I don't have access to that person anymore? Or what happens if that person gets pulled away? Or if it's me, what if I'm the one who gets pulled away? And I think right now in this environment, I think we need to be starting to think about if someone on our team is diagnosed with COVID-19, what happens? We've seen responses in the central Iowa space. You know, what happens when a diagnosis occurs within a district, when it occurs within a working place, within a particular company that had operations. I know on these calls, sometimes we talk to some folks who are, they're alternating, like some people are working in the office on some days and others on other days. Well, how does that change if someone in the office is diagnosed? What does it do to the interactions within the team? What if in a contingency plan, so maybe we've got a plan to keep everybody active and keep our hours as solid as they can for the moment, but what if an additional expense that we weren't expecting comes up? Or what if someone's hours continue to get reduced and we can't get the work done? Or what if someone gets laid off because of the financial pressures, right? So these are all examples of what if. Our plan, our goal is to operate within a certain amount of time with our disaster recovery plan, right? We're gonna do that. And the contingency plan is, well, what if this? What if this? What if that? And that contingency plan allows us to stop and think about it. So I don't want to be morbid, and I don't want to be a naysayer, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer. That's, good heavens, if you know me, that's not who I am, right? But really good, responsible risk management says that we've got to start talking about this, and we've got to start having a plan so that when the thing happens, we take it in stride and we're able to move forward without it being yet another crisis or without it being too disruptive. So I look back to years ago. So my husband and I had young kids at the time. So this is a lot of years ago. My husband and I had young kids at the time, and usually our plan was we sent the kids to the sitter, and if one of them was sick, then one or the other of us chose to stay home. And then if we didn't stay home, we had one backup sitter who was kind of our contingency plan, right? If somebody is sick, and then she's our contingency plan and she can stay home. And there was a day, it was May, and we had brought the kids to the sitter, sort of normally like we do. And I was on my way because I was teaching at IBAD, so the Iowa Business Analysis Development Day for the International Institute of Business Analysis. So I was teaching at IBAD that day. And I had already left and was on my way to that. And Spencer, my husband, was on a bus with a group of students bound for a tournament in Kentucky. So it was a Friday morning, and I was on my way to my thing, and he was on his way to his thing, and the sitter calls, and she says, Sophie, your younger one, is, well, she didn't clarify to me that it was my younger one. I know this, but you know, you get the idea. So she says, Sophie's running a fever, and she's sick, and I just don't think she needs to be here anymore. I think she needs a backup. So I'm like, all right, contingency plan, we got it. What if? So we had a backup plan for this. So we called our backup plan, and our backup plan said, I just can't, I just threw up. She said, I just got sick. I can't take your kid. I don't know, but I'm not gonna be able to take care of myself, let alone your kid. And so we realized that, okay, we've got backup plan. We got a sitter, we got a husband. Well, and so my sitter says, Seneca, can't you call Spencer? Well, I can, but he's on a bus bound for Kentucky, so he can't help. Well, can't you come back? Well, no, I'm about to speak to a group of 250 people. I can't come back right now. And we started to think through this. And eventually we were able to come up with, by my messaging Spencer and him talking to the students on his bus, we were able to find the parent of a student who was able to pinch hit and run and pick up our kid and keep her at her house until I could get home, right? But this became way more stressful than it needed to be. There's no reason for this level of stress. Now, granted, we don't always plan our backup plan and our backup plan and our backup plan of our backup plan. But in a moment where things are already spread thin, when a moment where things are already high risk, that backup plan to the backup plan, it's not just plan B, it's plan C, and maybe even plan D. That makes good sense. So how do you do it? How do you create a contingency plan? The first thing we got to do is we've got to identify the resources. So take inventory of the work and then the tools and the people able to do those work, and then the physical resources that need to be moved around. Like in our office, for example, we have a set of work that's only done on one machine. And if someone else is going to do that, we have to find a way to get that machine to that other person. So we started last Thursday, I think it was, talking about taking an inventory, right? That was on purpose. That was a precursor to this. We got to take an inventory of the work that needs to be done. We prioritize that, and then the people available to do the work and the resources that we need. Then the second step is to identify and prioritize the risks. So in risk management, we use the phrase if then, like if it rains, then I will get wet. And so what do? I carry an umbrella, right? If then, if someone gets sick, then they won't be able to complete that task. If we don't have access to the internet for some period of time, then this thing doesn't get completed. If this goes wrong, then here's the impact, right? So it's a cause and an effect. And then we create the response. What's our contingency response? The and so. In project management, we talk about if, then, and so. And so is where we take the power back. We take back control. We don't have to wring our hands in fear. We simply say, and so here's what I'm going to do about it. Back to my first illustration. If it rains, then I will get wet. And so I'll carry an umbrella. Then I get less wet, right? That's my, and so I'll have a change of clothes. In case I am wet, I can just change, right? And so is where we take back the power and you figure out what you're going to do about it. If person XYZ winds up having to step away for a couple days, then we're not going to be able to do A, B, and C, which are critical. And so we're going to make sure that so-and-so is back, is also trained or cross-trained on that task so that they can complete it. So you create that response. And usually when you're creating a contingency response, you're involving more than just one person, right? We plan together. Together we plan because we have different perspectives and different ideas and ways that we can accomplish this. So you create that response. That's the third step. The fourth step is to communicate that response. Communicate that contingency response. Once you've figured it out, then tell everybody. Don't keep it a secret, just share it. We took the time to plan it. Let's write it down. Let's publish it. Let's put it somewhere where we know. And I'm not saying everybody, not everybody needs to know about every contingency plan, but the people who are impacted by it should probably know that there's a plan. And then the last step is step number 5, which is to keep it fresh. Keep that contingency response fresh enough. I'm not saying we revisit it every 5 minutes. I'm not even sure we look at it every day. But on a material moment, like maybe Monday mornings or Monday afternoons, maybe for now, we look back at that contingency plan and make sure it's still true. We keep it fresh enough. So contingency planning is the topic of the day. And we take an inventory, right? Understand our resources. Second, we identify and prioritize the risks. Then we create that contingency response. Then we communicate that contingency response. And then we keep that response fresh enough.